Hi everyone. I am a physician with half a century of experience. 24 years ago, while working on my doctoral thesis on surgical treatment of epilepsy, I realized that something was amiss in neuroscience. It became clear why we don't know the answer to the question, how does the brain work? I thought I had discovered something important, something that would make us reconsider our understanding of brain functions. In 2004, the first discussion of my hypotheses took the form of a round table, which is what this video is actually about. A year later, I created a DVD on my hypotheses and distributed it to leading scientists and doctors in Armenia, hoping to awaken their desire to research my hypotheses, but without success. Later, I began presenting these hypotheses at international congresses. At the 14th Congress of the World Federation of Neurosurgical Societies in Boston in 2009, I presented the hypothesis of brain-blood circulation autoregulation in the manner of a seesaw as a lecture and a poster on the pathogenesis of epilepsy in the light of our hypotheses. Presentations followed in Barcelona, Seoul, Washington, Hangzhou, as well as in Armenia, at many scientific congresses and on television. The last discussion of my hypotheses abroad was in Chicago at the annual Congress of the American Association of Neurosurgeons. After that, for many reasons, I decided to stay silent. There's no point in beating one's head against concrete. Despite all my efforts, my ideas did not receive the wide recognition I had hoped for reasons that may have been beyond my understanding. The rapid progress of artificial intelligence has revived in me a new hope for success. I decided to reawaken my hypotheses once again. The first step was to revive my dormant website, which had been inactive for 18 years. The next step was to update my YouTube videos, many of which I had deleted myself. From these videos, it is necessary first to reissue the main one, that is the DVD, but now in English. The content of the video is significant in the context of medicine, technology, space exploration, and so on. A logical explanation of brain functions could lead to significant progress in medicine. The video material is intended to be presented unchanged. The quality is desired to be better. This video was edited 20 years ago. We are not specialists in video recording. Now my task is to only redo the sound from Russian to English. Enjoy the watch.
The human brain remains an unsolved mystery of nature. Despite the prolonged and extensive study it has undergone by specialists across various scientific fields, such as neurophysiology, histology, neurology, neurosurgery, psychiatry, diagnostics, and more. It has been examined by the founders of neuroscience and medicine, Cushing, Pavlov, Orbelie, Burdenko, among many others. Today, leading scientists have concluded that humanity will never fully grasp the mysteries of the brain, believing it harbors supernatural forces beyond our comprehension. However, this is not the case. The brain has become misunderstood largely because its functions have been, to put it mildly, misrepresented. At the onset of neuroscience, several critical errors were made, creating an artificial aura of mystery and complexity around the brain. The Armenian Medical Association organized a roundtable on this subject, featuring a report by the neurosurgeon, neuro-ophthalmologist Dr. Nicolae Khachatryan. We present this report in its entirety.
The brain remains a grand mystery of nature. To preserve this mystery, the luminaries of neuroscience diligently work. We aim to challenge them and unveil these mysteries. Corrections in neuroscience hypotheses. 1. The insulating cortex absorbs ascending waves during EEG. 2. Brain-blood autoregulation depending on intracranial pressure by a seesaw mechanism. 3. Reticular nuclei act as accumulators of electricity. 4. Sleep is the process through which these accumulators are charged. 5. The pathogenesis of neurosis and epilepsy. Electroencephalography, essentially real-time voltammetry. Practice has proven that these waves indeed reflect electrical processes in the brain. According to the widely accepted concept, EEG waves are the summative potentials of large groups of synchronously functioning cortical neurons. This conventional view is open to challenge. Nerve cells are equipped with robust electrical insulation. The brain's cortex, across its 7 layers, encompasses hundreds of levels of neuronal sheets. Chaotic, vertical, and horizontal intracellular electrical impulses constantly circulate within neurons, which cannot be measured by extracellular electrodes. Biological conductors, unlike metallic ones, utilize extracellular ions to conduct electricity, thereby forming extracellular disturbances measured in microvolts, while intracellular potentials are significantly larger and measured in millivolts. These electric processes in the cortex are chaotic and lack a vectoral meaning. However, when impulses are transmitted through projection, commissural and associative fibers in the white matter of the brain, electrical vectors form in the extracellular space, which are detected during EEG. The cortex surface is convoluted, varying among individuals and different brain regions. Yet EEG waves among people do not significantly differ. The recording decreases upon eye-opening and other stimulations. If these were cortical potentials, then eye-opening and stimulations would increase the potential, not decrease it. Thus, we believe that electroencephalography registers electrical potentials arising in the brain's white matter through a cortex-absorbing isolating layer. It is accepted in the scientific community that hyperventilation leads to hypocapnia, causing alkalosis, angiospasm, and brain ischemia, argued by the vasodilatory effect of carbon dioxide. Thus, normal state brain receiving oxygen typically remains in a state of hypoxia, awaiting sufficient hypocapnia for cerebral vessel dilation. Contrarily, improving circulation and oxygenation reduces brain carbon dioxide concentration, leading to hypoxia again. Absurd. We resolved to investigate these issues. Hundreds of video recordings of the fundus of both healthy and ill individuals before, during, and after hyperventilation were conducted. In no case did angiospasm occur in the retinal arterioles, rather arterioles increased in number and veins became lighter and narrowed. Yet, it is proven that brain hypoxia indeed occurs during hyperventilation. The thoracic cavity houses the lungs and heart. Deep inhalation draws not only air but also venous blood. This empties the brain's veins, reducing intracranial pressure. Cortical arteries, located within the arachnoid membrane and bathed in cerebrospinal fluid, are supported by special attaching beams. Before entering the cortex, they form spiral bends. Reduced intracranial pressure diminishes the tension of these beams, increasing arterial tortuosity, bending the vessels, and enhancing resistance to blood flow, resulting in cortical hypoxia. The tortuosity of arteries entering the cortex is deliberate, ensuring differentiated blood flow between the cortex and subcortex. This is the main argument of our hypothesis. Simultaneously, blood flow in penetrating arteries strengthens. These arteries nourish the subcortical system, including the hypothalamus and reticular nuclei. Lacking spiral bends, these arteries, with ascending straight branches from the circle of Willis, penetrate the subcortex. Thus, hyperventilation, associated with reduced intracranial pressure, leads to cortical ischemia and subcortical structure hyperemia. An increase in intracranial pressure may reversed effect. Effectively, the two functionally opposing parts of the brain, the cortex and subcortex, receive blood supply differently, just like opposite levers of a seesaw. We have thus named this hypothesis the hypothesis of brain-blood autoregulation, depending on intracranial pressure via seesaw mechanism. Neuron cells accumulates and transmits electrical impulses. The source of this energy raises questions. It is not yet proven that the electrical energy generated by the neurons themselves is sufficient for performing brain functions. It is known that during diastole, an electrical impulse is generated inside the isolated heart's myocardium. This electricity fuels the heart's autonomous system. Currently, we propose that electricity enters the brain from the periphery, presumably from muscle spindles, still regarded as proprioceptors. They likely serve as the source of electricity for the entire nervous system and the organism as a whole. Entering the brain, electricity is stored in the nonspecific cells of reticular nuclei. Literature contains such assertions. Subsequently, this energy is utilized for performing the nervous system's functions. Thus, the brain operates in a two-phase manner. During sleep, the subcortical nonspecific nuclei, accumulators, are charged, and during wakefulness, this energy is expended. Sleep, fundamentally, is the process of charging the brain with electricity. Explaining the electroencephalography of sleep in light of our hypotheses. The study of EEG during sleep has been subject to an immense volume of waste paper, forgive the expression. This also pertains to neurosis and epilepsy. Electroencephalographic manifestations of sleep are too varied and depend on the individual's gender and age, the time of day they fall asleep, recording method, climatic conditions, nature of work activity, overall fatigue level, hypodynamia, stress factors, menstrual cycle, pregnancy, various diseases, medications taken, and so forth. According to different authors, sleep phases range from 3 to 8. Let's explain the essence of rapid and slow wave sleep according to our understanding. As one falls asleep, cortical neurons gradually cease functioning, leading to charge of electricity, that is, polarize. This leads to neuronal inhibition. During this time, cortical interneural impulses slow down, the absorbing insulating capacity of the cortex decreases, resulting in high impulses reaching the EEG electrodes. Therefore, we observe high and slow rhythms on the EEG, essentially reflecting reticulocortical impulses. This phase is slow wave sleep. A moment comes when cortical neurons become saturated, fully inhibited, and then the reticular nuclei themselves start to charge. Ascending impulses to the cortex through white matter conductors cease. Consequently, EEG waves reflecting intercellular disturbance due to impulses in nerve bundles in white matter decrease and the recording becomes low. This is the rapid eye movement REM sleep phase. The recording in this phase is low, which usually on EEG signifies an active cortex. But this phase clinically represents the deepest sleep. Hence, this phase is also called paradoxical. According to our hypothesis, there is no paradox here. Neurosis is a severe ailment. If pronounced, it ruins a person's life. If moderate, the person becomes a politician and ruins the lives of others. Patients wander from one doctor to another. The disease's clinical picture is as diverse as its name. Physicians call it neurocirculatory or vegetovascular dystonia. Functional disorder of the nervous system, fear neurosis, obsessive states, depressive, hysterical, hypochondriac neurosis, neurasthenia, neurotic stuttering, tics, sleep disorders, appetite disorders, enuresis, encopresis, obsessive-compulsive, depressive, anxiety-phobic, affective, psychopathological disorders. The pathogenesis of neurosis, according to our hypothesis, sometimes is closely related to an increase in intracranial pressure, very common in convective arachnoiditis. This disease makes it difficult to absorb cerebrospinal fluid and increases intracranial pressure. Under such conditions, according to the mechanism of brain-blood autoregulation, chronic hypoxia of the subcortex occurs, and the subcortical accumulator suffers. Depending on the degree and location of the damaged accumulator and the premorbid installation package of the given brain, one or another clinical form of neurosis occurs. Besides the damage to bioaccumulators, other parts of the diencephalic brain also suffer. A monster is formed, a four-headed dragon, the diencephalic tetrad. Metabolic, autonomic, hormonal disorders, and neurosis. We conducted video monitoring of the fundus, studying the fundus in dynamics. We had video recordings of the fundus, processed them, and saved them as files for future comparative analysis. It is known that the fundus provides important information about intracranial pressure. If neurosis results from prolonged increased intracranial pressure, then this study becomes mandatory for this disease. This research offers new possibilities for resolving many brain and vascular problems, and not only. We hope that in the future, photo and video of the fundus will become widely accessible and widespread. Some parameters of the fundus, such as the assessment of venous pulsation, depth of excavation, are possible only with video recordings. Moving forward, we aim to improve the device and produce stereoscopic video recordings of the fundus, which will significantly increase the diagnostic value of this research. In neurosis, the picture of the fundus adjusts with the clinical picture of the disease. In the acute period of neurosis, peripapillary and perivascular edemas, venous fullness, increased venous pulsation, etc. are often observed on the fundus. During remission or as a result of adequate treatment, the picture of congestion passes. EEG in neurosis is low, a sign of weak subcortical electrocapacity. The pathogenesis of epileptic seizures, the hypothesis of a short circuit near major bioaccumulators of electricity. For some reason, a large amount of electricity flows out into the intercellular space from the brain's reticular nuclei. The brain begins to de-energize. The cortex ceases to function and consciousness is lost. The motor pyramidal cells also de-energize. They depolarize, that is, become irritated. This manifests as tonic seizures. In the next stage, the electricity flowing out into the intercellular space affects the excitability of cortical neurons with reverse vectoral values, causing clonic seizures. After the seizure, the de-energized brain needs to recharge, hence the patient sleeps. The structure of the seizure is determined by the localization and scale of the short circuit. Our reasoning requires thorough study and scientific analysis. If the presented hypotheses, or even a small part of them, are confirmed, their practical value cannot be overstated.
The report concluded and the discussion began. The report was met with mixed reactions. Academician Sharon Zagrebian then took the floor.
I believe it is correct that Dr. Karkatrian raises these issues. He provides some constructive conclusions based on logical reasoning and presents them to us. If these constructive remarks were not only logical, but also supported by the latest serious research methods, then of course the concepts proposed by Dr. Karkatrian would have more significant value. I can say that we currently know only about 10% of the brain's activity, its operations. 90% remains behind the scenes. We still speculate, hope that someday we will decipher it.
He made critical remarks.
Dr. Karkatrian has raised a serious issue, the activity of the nervous system, the brain in particular, the relationship between the cortex and the subcortex, bringing to light certain studies. I would not say they are very complicated, but in any case, they are quite interesting, and have led to a specific conclusion that the existing views on the activity of the brain cortex, subcortical structures, and beyond are not entirely accurately represented in science. In science, especially in the area of electroencephalography, which has been dominant in our understanding for more than 65 years. Until the advent of the latest research methods, such as computer tomography and so forth, electroencephalography was one of the leading methods for studying the brain.
The presenter objected.
We have proposed hypotheses that cannot be confirmed by a single person, a single institute, or even by a single country alone. These hypotheses are simplified, schematic representations of brain function, which contemporary neuroscience portrays as the most complex, unsolvable mysteries hidden behind 7 locks. To transform these hypotheses into theories will require time, and not just 1 decade. For starters, we present these hypotheses to our colleagues, and we very much hope that all our leading scientists could be present at this roundtable.
However, the majority of leading scientists and doctors were occupied with matters deemed more critical than science and medicine, and were not in attendance. As scientists debate, epilepsy and neurosis continue to claim more and more victims. Aside from tranquilizers, modern medicine has yet to devise a sensible solution. Therefore, these diseases have become a source of profit for a multitude of quacks, charlatans, fortune tellers, and healers, among others.
Every one of us tries to treat patients with neurosis, and not just us, doctors. These patients feed all those who are involved in medical practice.
As for epilepsy, the presenter was pessimistic.
Epilepsy remains and will remain an unresolved problem in neurology as long as electroencephalography is considered a recording of electricity generated by cortical neurons. As long as in this recording the segment considered positive is below the isoelectric line, and the negative is above, contrary to the Euclidean variant accepted in neuroscience. Why? It's unclear. As long as the concept of an epileptic focus is considered an electroencephalographic concept. By focus, we understand the place where the center of events is located. Today, we stated that the interpretation of electroencephalography is too controversial, hence, the EEG focus is controversial. As long as the epileptic lesion is considered tissue generating electricity, as long as scientific terms such as epileptic focus, lesion, and system are used at one's discretion and current mood.
Scientific discussions exist to reveal the truth, to discover what is acceptable for practical use, with the aim of improving human health. This report repeatedly emphasizes the special significance of the brain-blood autoregulation depending on intracranial pressure. It is possible that this is the greatest discovery on the path to understanding the brain. Time will tell.
Among the presented hypotheses, we especially highlight the new autoregulation mechanism of brain-blood circulation. Besides the already known three mechanisms, there exists a fourth, according to which the relationship between the circulation of the cortex and the subcortex of the brain is regulated by changes in intracranial pressure. This mechanism is key to deciphering many mysteries of the brain.
With this, the Roundtable concluded its work.
The topic of the report is sensational because it expresses doubts about the correctness of some doctrines of modern neurology, doctrines that guide the organization of neurological care for billions of people. The presentation format was unique for such an audience, a lecture accompanied by a video film. However, after the roundtable, the scientific doctors did not react vehemently, which is what we actually expected. The topic is too complex for understanding by standardized specialists, as many modern doctors have become, even more so for non-medical persons. Therefore, we decided to release this disc and provide some explanations in a simpler form. Sooner or later, the mysteries of the brain will be unveiled, and then neurosis, epilepsy, schizophrenia, and so on will become curable. We are striving to ensure this day comes as soon as possible.
What do these corrections in neuroscience offer? Essentially, these are not merely corrections, but the cornerstone of a new neurology. Correcting the indicated errors will be very difficult because the leading neuroscientists of the world consider these errors to be irrefutable dogmas. These mistakes have become subject indexes for doctors worldwide in their practical activities. We, I believe, like many others, including doctors, have experienced the sad results of such treatments, when it's impossible not only to understand what is happening with the patients, but also what the outcome of the treatment will be. Neurological terminology is saturated with words like, I don't know, unexpectedly, paradoxically, probably, unknown, unclear, and so on. If our hypotheses are confirmed, there will be a sharp leap forward in medicine for the better, and not just in medicine. Even today, based on these hypotheses, we can help many patients, especially those with neurosis and epilepsy.
Now, a few words about neurosis. We are talking about acquired neurosis. Neurosis caused by the weakness of the serotonergic system, metaphorically speaking, a neurosis from the weakness of the brain's relays, another pathology not currently under discussion. The brain performs its functions using electricity. The brain itself does not generate electricity, meaning there must be an external power source. This source is likely to be skeletal muscles. Our brain is imperfect, as many like to repeat. The brain cannot work and recharge simultaneously. Inside the brain are accumulators that charge during sleep. When we wake up, the brain starts using this energy. But what happens if these accumulators are diseased? What clinical symptoms will be observed, and what will such a disease be called? In such cases, groups of diseases known under the collective name of neurosis manifest. Neurosis is the weakness of the subcortical accumulators when there is not enough electricity to perform any brain functions.
Reticular cells, the brain's accumulators, are located in the subcortex. Adjacent to them is the hypothalamus, which controls vital functions of the organism, autonomic, metabolic, and hormonal systems. We have already mentioned that high intracranial pressure is detrimental to the hypothalamus and the subcortical accumulators. Unfortunately, pathological increase in intracranial pressure is a very common condition. This is often observed in chronic viral inflammations of the brain's membranes, in other words, in arachnoiditis. When a virus is activated in the body, it often affects both large and small joints. In such cases, it is necessary to immobilize the joint, and the inflammation subsides without much medical effort. What happens if the inflammation occurs in the rib vertebral joints in the interscapular area? Men breathe with their abdomen, so these joints are less mobile and inflammations pass quickly. However, in women who breathe with their chest, these joints are in constant motion, and the inflammatory process does not subside. Around these joints are spinal roots. Viral infections ascend through the roots to the brain's membranes, causing chronic inflammation. Inflamed brain membranes cannot properly absorb cerebrospinal fluid, resulting in increased intracranial pressure. Besides joints, favorite sites for the rampant reproduction of viruses are the paranasal sinuses and upper respiratory tract, the mucous membrane of the gastrointestinal tract, the mucous membrane of the uterus during certain phases of the menstrual cycle, and the developing fetus during pregnancy. After childbirth, a mother's body retains many pathologically active viruses, which seek new habitats. This may explain the confirmed fact that women often develop diencephalic syndrome after giving birth.
As a result of hypoxia of the subcortex, the reticular cells, the brain accumulators, begin to charge poorly. The process of charging the brain, in other words, sleep, is disrupted. Waking up, a person cannot fully and completely perform all the functions of the brain due to a lack of electricity. Neurosis develops. The pathology also affects the hypothalamus, leading to autonomic disturbances, fluctuations in blood pressure, acceleration or decrease in pulse, sensations of heat and cold, respiratory disorders, stomach, liver, intestinal, and urinary bladder functions, and so on. The hypothalamus is the hormonal center of the body. Disruptions in the production of regulators of female sex hormones can lead to uterine fibroids, ovarian cysts, mastopathy, and possibly malignant formations of these organs. In men, these disruptions can lead to impotence and infertility. But the most destructive changes occur in the metabolism when the hypothalamus is affected. Glucose is the fuel of the body. Burning with oxygen, it provides sufficient energy for a vast amount of physical and mental work. Normally, excess glucose is bound with water and converted into fat, accumulating for a rainy day. In metabolic disorders, this happens more than necessary. On the one hand, the fuel, glucose for existence, becomes insufficient, and on the other, uncontrollable obesity occurs.
A living organism cannot exist without cholesterol, triglycerides, and lipoproteins because they are the building materials for cells.
When fat metabolism is disturbed, the amount of cholesterol in the blood increases. This causes atherosclerosis and cardiovascular diseases, which today rank first in prevalence and mortality. Our hypotheses point to a possible hypothalamic nature of the century's killer. Essentially, we are pointing to the den of the world's #1 criminal. The hypothalamus is a self-regulating center, the body's own doctor. We can only be ill when our own doctor is sick. If intracranial pressure is high, then our internal doctor starves and starts to malfunction.
Deep within the brain resides our own physician. If you are ill, it means he is too. Then, it is necessary to feed and take care of him. Concurrently, the brain's accumulators will be repaired, electricity will be sufficient, and neurosis will recede. The key to the brain's secret states that if intracranial pressure is low, then the subcortex begins to receive a lot of blood. This means we should lower the pressure within the skull. If only we could draw venous blood from the brain with a syringe. Nature has gifted us with such a syringe. It is our lungs. With a deep breath, due to the negative pressure in the thoracic cavity, not only air but also venous blood rushes to the lungs. Blood is drawn from the venous system, including from the brain, After several such deep breaths, the lungs fill with blood. Now we need to squeeze this blood out like water is squeezed from a sponge. To squeeze the lungs, deep inhalation and stretching are performed. The lungs compress between the air and the rib cage. Blood from the lungs enters the left ventricle and continues to participate in circulation. Through these exercises, we practically not only lower intracranial pressure, but also assist the heart. Nature itself invented such exercises. These include yawning, crying, laughter, screaming, singing, physical work, and so on. These exercises do not have specific instructions or doses. One should breathe until dizziness appears, after which stretching maneuvers are performed. Then the process is repeated as much as one sees fit. To enhance the absorption of cerebrospinal fluid, we often recommend compresses with vinegar on the scalp, especially on cloudy days. The compresses can be left on overnight. This is a universally accessible method of lowering intracranial pressure. We also recommend using hypertonic solutions. For this, it is not necessary to drink one's own or someone else's urine, hydrogen peroxide, donkey milk, etc. It is simply necessary to consume something salty or sweet, mainly honey, before bedtime and at night. Initially, hypertensives should be cautious and monitor their blood pressure to avoid a hypertensive crisis. Unfortunately, sweet is contraindicated for diabetics. These recommendations can be used without a doctor's consultation because they are absolutely harmless and also beneficial for healthy people too. As for medical assistance with neurosis, that is a separate and extensive discussion. To our colleagues dealing with the treatment of neurosis, we recommend first and foremost to lower intracranial pressure by all known methods. Only in this case can neurotropic and vascular treatment bring the desired effect. I hope that in the future, minimally invasive neurosurgical procedures, shunts, will be applied for regulating intracranial pressure. In any case, I cannot imagine space flights without these shunts. Intracranial pressure is also affected by gravity, which is absent in space. As for the primary source of disease, often foci viral accumulation, that is, pathology of the paranasal sinuses and upper respiratory tract, the mucous membrane of the gastrointestinal tract, uterus, and joints, the resolution of these problems is the next task for treating neurosis. They must be addressed or the effect will be short-lived. Inflammations of the spinal joints, manifested as cervical, thoracic, and lumbar osteochondrosis, are frequent causes of neurosis. For treating spondylitis, in addition to antiviral, anti-inflammatory, and other drug treatments, local procedures are required: massage, warming, and anti-inflammatory ointments, physiotherapy, and so on. Our experience suggests that the best way to destroy these inflammatory foci is through local, deep paravertebral injections of medicinal compounds directly above the joint, above the disc, and into the intervertebral forum and not subcutaneously. Dear friend, you can only be healthy when your doctor is well fed. Your doctor is not me, nor someone else. Your doctor is inside your brain. His name is hypothalamus. If he is healthy and well nourished, no ailment will befall you. It is always necessary to remember that the body's defensive capabilities are limited. Do not delay treatment. At least follow our recommendations. Be healthy.